Welcome into the DNVR Avalanche Podcast presented by DraftKings Sportsbook. Use code DNVR to sign up for a new account to get amazing odds boosts every single day. Rudo, Jesse, AJ coming at you. Don't get your hopes up too much about trade bait talk today, all right? It's going to come. Keep your eyes peeled once the All-Star break gets here. We're gonna like maybe dip a pinky toe in, but this is mostly gonna be a show taking a look at where the Avs stand right now and what realistic expectations can be for this hockey team. At the point we were making before the show, 2 weeks ago, all of chat was begging us to talk about goaltenders. Now,
yeah. So I want to start here because before we even decided to have just decided to do the show, I said January 13th. Okay, it's January 25th. So January 13th, not even 2 full weeks ago, this conversation would have started with goaltender, right? That's where everybody would have been wanting to talk about. January 25th. The Avs have 3 shutouts in 6 games. Both goalies look dope. Everybody's feeling good. Losing isn't a thing that any of us understand anymore. Time is completely made up. It's just how it is.
Yep.
Yeah, and it's a great point both of you guys making. That's what we want to do with this show. So if you're expecting us to get into like, oh, this is our trade bait list, what we want to do is we want to set realistic expectations, because on the 13th, we were all kind of laughing because that's where everyone would have wanted us to start. And even on January 13th, we would have come out on this show and been like, they're not trading for a goalie. If both guys are healthy, they're not doing it. So yeah, we thought it'd be fun to set some expectations, understand where the Avs are at, what's realistic for them and what isn't.
Keep in mind that there are 22 games that the Avs have yet to play between today and the deadline.
Yeah, this conversation is going to change 50 times between now and then.
What's funny is the 50th time might bring it right back to where we are right now.
Today. Yeah. And then the other thing to consider too is, there was going to be an Olympic break. You maybe would have seen some movement and stuff before then, but moves that other teams make will change this conversation, not just the Avs. But I think now we're at a good point. It's snowy and fucking gross outside. So why not just kick back with some trade talk, right?
All right. Well, let's start with the boring stuff. As of right now, the Avs' expected deadline cap space is about $750K.
Subject to change.
It's
2 guys on LTIR that'll probably be off of LTIR before the deadline.
So that's even less space, is my point. The Avs cannot just go out and get Patrick Kane full dollar value and throw him on the lineup and be good to go. It's not realistic. They're going to have to do some salary cap management if they're getting a significant trade piece coming in. So, what are realistic avenues to the Avs freeing up some cap space? Let's start there.
Well, so I was do you want to start?
Here we go. Everybody's immediately. Immediately we just smashed our virtual vehicles into each other trying to get to JT Comfer first.
Well, what I was going to say was I was looking at it last night, and realistically, when you look at this Avs roster, there's 4, maybe 5 names of guys that you can find that you would say, I think they'd be comfortable losing them. And then that number gets even smaller when you talk about legitimate money moving out to make any type of room for someone coming back in. And yes, it's JT Compher, but there is one other name that is super interesting because you probably have to do a little bit of selling. And you'd have to also make it clear, like, hey, we need to include this guy to make the money work. But the other name that's interesting is Ryan Murray. It's a $2 million cap hit, who's not a regular part of your rotation right now, that if you can find a way to move that out as part of a package, as part of a sweetener, that is another name similar to JT Compher that moves out a decent chunk of money.
Well, and where Ryan Murray is interesting is that there's no money beyond this year. So if they get, and this is purely as a
dump the money.
The Avs have to move money out in order to take money in. So Ryan Murray would only be, you're talking Ryan Murray would just be like, hey, he can serve as, say, this is a Philly or a Dallas. Mm-hmm. He can serve as kind of, in Dallas, he would be the young man on that blue line, but he comes in and they just say, okay, well, how does this guy fit in the last 20 games? Maybe he wants to come back and we liked what we saw and he has a role with us and blah, blah, blah. Maybe it's not. Maybe it's like, right, we're good. And $2 million. I mean, it helps, right? Because you're going to have to be anything you can. So
yeah.
Where Murray has his advantage in this conversation is that he's an expiring deal.
Yeah.
So a team isn't committing to something. Where JT Compher and Tyson Jost are going to be at a disadvantage here is that they're obviously signed. Now, Jost isn't RFA at the end of his deal, so he would be more intriguing there. But you're also talking about you're getting a pretty hard-capped fourth-line guy who's, granted, he's still only 23 years old, which is insane to think about.
Yeah.
That he's only 23, turns 24 in March. I think it's in March. I don't know. Yeah, March 14th. It's right in front of me. So March 14th. So he turns 24, but he's still signed like for next year. So if they get him in there and it just doesn't work or whatever, like they're committed to him. So JT Compher, same thing. Now Compher's already 26. He turns 27 later this year and is a UFA at the end of that deal.
Yep.
And part of this conversation is certainly if you're talking about teams that are in a rebuilding phase, I'll put it that way, there is going to be a little bit more value to a player like JT Compher for them, right? Where you're talking about a guy who's going to be a regular in their lineup, and is he worth $3.5 million? Maybe not, but someone that they can use every night.
Well, and we just talked about that. I believe it was on a show last week where, Avs fans talk a lot about Tyson Jost and JT Compher and, they're not good enough and whatever. But on almost any other team, JT Compher is getting a solid, to your point, even any of these teams that we are going to be talking about, Philly, Dallas, you're speaking under the assumption of they're out of the playoff race.
Right.
And they are entering into a bit of a phase where they're rebuilding. Your eyes are awfully wide. What are you?
You don't want to know. Just let it go.
Okay. All right. And so, no, I think that's a great point, Rudo, where you're not these players that we're talking about right here that are part of the cap. These aren't the centerpieces of this deal, but a team like Philly, a team like Dallas, who is looking to rebuild, or maybe kind of reset.
We don't know that Dallas is looking to rebuild yet.
Right.
Like,
well, and again,
Dallas has to make that decision first.
Right. And like I said, I guess that's where I should say these conversations right now are under the assumption that these teams are willing to sell off players because they consider themselves out of it, whatever. JT Compher is a totally serviceable third line player for most teams. You'd probably even find a couple teams that would try him at second. On the second line, but I mean, you could find some teams that would do it.
I mean, they're like, depending on
where he would fit that.
Like, certainly the selling point of him to another team is, look, we've just been a little too deep the last couple of years. He's a middle six guy. I mean, he was a middle six guy for us.
Yep. Before
we started getting a lot of good players.
Right. Yeah, so you can make that sell. I think there would be plenty of teams that if you're getting centerpieces, which we're going to get to, high round picks, high end prospects. Yeah, you'll take JT Compher as a roster player to make a deal work that makes helps your team in the immediate to some extent while you're waiting on picks and prospects that you're getting back in these deals. So these aren't the centerpieces, but these are the pieces that are going to make some of these deals work. There's people in the chat talking about, oh, well, the Avs don't have any salary cap space. Right. That's what we're talking about here.
Yeah, because otherwise the Avs don't want to touch their NHL roster. They want to add to it.
Right.
Because any guy that they take off the roster is a guy that they have to replace.
Yeah.
Now, if you're just because we're kind of in this room, if you're trading for Claude Giroux, because we're talking about Philly here, they trade for Claude Giroux and JT Compher's in that package. Well, Claude Giroux replaces JT Compher in the lineup, but then it's anybody beyond that, right? Like there's dudes beyond that you have to. Okay, if you get rid of Tyson Jost, now you need a fourth line guy,
right?
Which fourth line guy or which guy do you push down? That can take that job, that fills his role and that does his thing. And so you have to keep that part of it in mind as well. That yes, Claude Giroux would come in and do X, Y, and Z, but you still need a guy to do the A, B, and C that the guy who left was doing. Right. You have a guy to fill that role. So, obviously that's an upgrade. Like going from JT Compher or Tyson Jost to a Claude Giroux, you got a lot better, and you got a high-end impact player who helps you in so many ways. And we'll get there. But you have to keep that in mind. And the only real reason that we're even having this conversation is because the Avs have to move money.
Yep.
Right.
To bring in anything of note, money has to go out.
Yeah. Any money that comes in, money has to go out to try and help it. And we're talking about a guy like Giroux. It's $8 million. You got a lot of work to do.
Even at full retention, you still need to move money to make room for him.
Exactly. There's a lot of work to do in order to get there.
And I don't know if we want to get into this now, or if we maybe want to save this talking point for maybe another show or later in the show. But I don't think it's out of the question that there's going to be teams like Seattle and Arizona that are going to be saying, "Hey, we'll take some of that salary for a pick. We'll take some of that salary for a prospect.
Jump $1 million on us for a third rounder."
Right. Yep. Right. Yeah. So that's something that I think the Avs are going to be very interested in doing. And if you are Philly, or some of these teams that we're going to get into, if you are staring down letting a Claude Giroux test free agency for nothing, you'll be happy to retain because he's a UFA after this year. That retention doesn't really hurt any of those teams. So if they're getting the best package from the Avs in terms of what they're getting back, I don't think you're going to see many teams do what Buffalo did with the Jack Eichel thing, where they had their feelings hurt, so they were unwilling to retain, in these situations. So I think the Avs are going to be really interesting. I think they're right now at a point, obviously it's different in the salary cap era. You can't be as all in every year as Pierre Lacroix was every year for the Avs. But I do, man. I think they're looking at this and saying, we've only got one more year of McKinnon on the cheap deal. We don't have any goalie signed for next year. I think they are looking at this season as we are going to make any move we need to. And we're going to get into picks and prospects here in the next period. But I just don't think that they are very married to anything they've got internally right now. If there's a way they can make their NHL team better and give themselves a better chance at bringing home a Stanley Cup this year, I think they're going to take a real serious look at it.
All right.
Yeah, there's just a lot of work to do. And that's as we start to slowly work our way into deadline conversations on off day pods.
Yeah.
It's just a reality that we're going to continue to talk about. It's hard to make these deals.
Yep.
Look at previous deadlines. It's hard to make a meaningful improvement.
Yep.
Joe Sakic's best deadline deal to date is freaking Vlad Nemestikov.
Yep.
Right.
So, and it's not even close. Like, pretty much none of the others really worked out, I guess, unless you want to go all the way back to Sean Matthias and Mikhail Bodker.
Just about to say, Sean Matthias, I feel like, was good here.
Yeah, and what's weird is both of those guys were out of the league, like,
within a couple of years. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I can guarantee you, Chad, that nothing wants to make AJ drink more than talking about trade deadline rumors 2 months before the deadline. So go get yourself a Breckenridge brewery and get yourself an Avalanche right now to fit the theme of the Avalanche trade deadline. It works out great. They have a bunch of amazing flavors you can get at your local liquor store using the Breck beer locator on the line. Also, be sure to check out their Good Company hard seltzers if you're more of a seltzer person. Those things genuinely taste like candy. It's kind of unfair that those are alcoholic drinks, but they work. That's for sure. So hit up Breck Brew, get your favorite drinks. And then if you're looking for a house like I'm starting to do, be sure to hit up Chevalier Mortgage. Both Mike and Virginia have been in the business here in Colorado for a very, very long time. So they know the ins and outs of everything you need when you're trying to get set up with a home loan. Mike is a certified financial planner, so he will look at your entire financial picture and get you the right home loan, not just to buy your house, but for you and your foreseeable future. It's a really awesome thing. I've been talking with them a little bit as of late as we start our process, and they're super responsive, super friendly to just get you whatever you might need. So head over to dnvrmortgage.com and you can get a free consultation from them, as well as your chance to win some free DNVR merch. You can also call Virginia directly at 303-257-6578. Michael Chevalier, NMLS 1931006. Virginia Chevalier, NMLS 1910631. Also, come on down to the DNVR bar this Saturday. We've got the Goaties going on from 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. We're going to play a bunch of fun games. We're going to announce the awards. You can vote right now for Newcomer of the Year. P.S. Vote for Devon Taves. There's no argument for anyone but Devon Taves in that vote. So go make sure he wins and then come hang out, have some Breck brews with us down at the bar on Saturday when we have a ton of fun and see that the Avs win all of the awards. Should be good. Should be a good time. Second period of the DNVR Avalanche podcast presented by DraftKings Sportsbook. Oh, Allie. Yeah, look at that. Taves is in the lead, but that's pretty tight. Aaron Gordon shouldn't be that close. All right.
Yeah.
Pat Surtain, every one of you that voted for Pat Surtain, not allowed to vote ever again for anything, ever. Your decision-making privileges as an adult are revoked.
Out. You're out.
There you go. This was a test, and you failed.
We don't make the rules.
Yeah, that's what they are. Sorry.
That's what it is.
And I say that as a huge Pat Surtain fan. I love him.
There we go. Thank you.
Give me a break.
All right, second period. Jesse, you were kind of alluding to it. One of the big problems that stand in front of the Avs heading towards this trade deadline, they don't have a first, they don't have a second in the 2022 draft.
But they have first round picks in 2023 and 2024.
Just go full Nuggets and trade a 2028 second. It'll be fine.
Yeah. Yeah. That's always my favorite thing with junior hockey. Like they've traded their 2032 second round pick. It's like, what?
The Windsor Spitfires have traded a 3-year-old.
Yeah, when you consider that they are junior players, the age of those guys, you're like, that kid is legit 4 years old right now, whoever they take with that pick.
Well, and it's also like such like toxic credit card habits. Like, oh yeah, if I don't have to pay for this for another 10 years, I can spend it right now. Just bad habits.
That's future me's problem.
You know what?
Yeah. There's no way I'll still be the GM by the time that we have to make good on that. So who gives a fuck?
That is exactly how Jim Rutherford was the GM his entire Penguins tenure.
Yeah.
There's no way this will be my problem. He every time that he was walking down the street and he saw a can, he didn't know why, but instinctively he just kicked it down the road.
Yeah.
When it's ingrained that deep, I guess.
Yeah. You just can't help it. You just wandering down the street, there's a can. Oh, gotta kick that thing.
Yeah.
Just lived his whole life that way. GM'd his whole GM tenure in Pittsburgh exactly like that. And look at them. They're still contending. Those guys are deep into their 30s, and they're still rolling.
Yep. So they don't have a first and second in this year. Yes, they do have future picks, but obviously most teams that are selling at the deadline want the more immediate return, which of course is going to lead us to the conversation of Avalanche prospects on the block. Let's start with things that are completely off limits for the Avs.
I am super curious about this. Players that you guys feel like, and again, this is just going to be in our opinion.
Yeah.
But players that you guys feel like, no, like even unless an unrealistic conversation that will not be happening, like Edmonton calls about Leon Draisaitl or something.
Yeah. If you're not, you give up everything. You don't care.
Right. Like you're not having this conversation about this player in any kind of a realistic scenario.
Right.
So
yeah, for me, I don't know if the Avs have any prospects that you would consider like untouchable in a situation like what you just laid out. Like I think there's no Cale Makars coming up anymore.
Well,
honestly.
I'm not touching Bowen Byram.
Yeah. Well, I don't consider him a prospect.
And I'm not touching Alex Newhook.
Yeah, I don't.
Yeah.
So
no, not see both those guys I consider
NHL
roster
lineup.
players. Yep.
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah. And moving on from either of those guys doesn't give you any, relief where it's like, oh, well, yeah, you move on from Byram, but that frees up $7 million in cap space. Like, no, I don't consider those guys as part of the prospect pool anymore. Those are roster players to me, which I don't think they would want to take off.
My only other, don't even bother asking me about it, is Justus Annunen.
Yeah, I agree.
Just don't do it. Just don't pick. Just don't take. We don't need to take the 30 seconds out of this phone call. Don't. Nope. I'm not trading Justus Annunen for any of these guys.
There's a non-zero chance that on July 1st for 7 minutes until they sign another goaltender that Justus Annunen is the best goaltender on the team.
Right. He's going to be the only goaltender under contract up until they make a decision. It's going to be him and Trent Miner.
Him being their only real, like, legitimate NHL potential goaltender prospect definitely puts him on a little bit of like a questionable list for me, but obviously, and this is why you don't like having these conversations this far in advance, but like, obviously it all just depends on the package. If someone wants him as their centerpiece, then it's like, oh, shit. Well, if we can hold on to all these other prospects and, next year's first round pick and stuff, because they just love Justus Annunen, I don't know. But for me, it's you have to pick one of your defensive prospects, Helleson or Barron, whichever one you feel better about. And that's kind of what you say is your untouchable. Other than that, I don't know if there's anyone in that prospect pool that I'm saying, again, if you're talking about like Claude Giroux, I don't know if there's anyone that I'm saying, no, I'm not even, Sampo Ranta I think he's in the mix. Olausen, I think he's in the mix. Obviously, Shane Bowers has lost a lot of his kind of trade value in the last year and a half. I'm fine putting Annunen in that conversation, but otherwise, I think it's Barron or Helleson. You decide which one you like better. You take that guy off the table, and then the other one.
I will say, if anyone's calling about the defensive prospects, I would be like, hey, look at Sean Barons.
Yeah.
Oh, look at Sean Barons.
I would start, if somebody who really wants a defender, I would start with Sean Barons, and it's entirely about his path to a job in Colorado right now is tough.
Yep.
Because you've got 4 pretty entrenched guys between Taves, Gerard, Makar, Byram, and then you do have Barron and Helleson just chilling.
Yeah.
So you're kind of like,
I
love that, but Drew Helleson is not 6'5". But yeah. But Sean Barron's had a really good year.
Yep.
There's
a little hype on him.
So I think that it's funny because Will Butcher might be like his best
comparable.
like his best comp right now.
Yeah, so I mean, I fully agree with that if someone's saying, well, we like your defensive prospects, I think you start there knowing that you may have to, go a little bit more on picks or give them, cool, take Sean Barons and then another mid-level prospect that you like instead of, a Hellison or a Justin Barron.
Oh, I would say Hellison is a mid-level prospect.
Oh, really?
I think he's overvalued in Colorado because of his style.
Right.
So
it's just
because
such a good fit for what the Avs
right,
need.
like you're like, okay, well, how can they avoid signing Jack Johnson next year? Develop Drew Hellison to do the exact same stuff, right?
Right.
That's but you look at him as like, okay, how good of an NHLer is he going to be? And this is nothing against Hellison. I just think that it's not the same conversation
as
not, Justin Barron.
Because with Drew Hellison, if the Avs get a third pairing defensive D out of him, they're slam dunking that. They're super happy with that.
Yeah, and if they get a borderline like 4-5 guy, like if they get Ryan Graves out of Drew Hellison, they are
insane. Yeah,
thrilled, right? Like they are thrilled, but Justin Barron is legitimately a guy that, like, when Devon Taves' contract is up,
that's exactly
you're kind of like, well,
maybe
we don't give him $9 million when he's 32 because Justin Barron is here and he's kind of taking that job.
Right. Well, and I also think that, I mean, there's the very well documented story that Nathan McKinnon was essentially the one that made that pick. What?
AJ hates this story because it's
not
true.
Yeah,
what do you mean it's not true?
It just drives me crazy. The idea that like McKinnon like drove.
You don't think he's got input?
Whatever. I mean, I think he was like, I like this guy, this dude, this dude, that. But it was like the conversations that I'd had with people, like nothing changed. Like. It doesn't in any way hurt, obviously.
But where I was going with that was,
anyway,
you've got someone who's a big advocate for that player, who works out in the offseason with that player, and who obviously wants him here, regardless of how much you believe the story or not. That he wanted Justin Barron to be part of the organization to some extent, and so I'd imagine that. Internally, you probably want to hold on to that guy a little bit more. What?
Blaze, we were talking about the thing we were talking about before. Blaze says, it looks like Kale's taking a piss on the Star.
Is that what you were laughing at earlier?
Yeah.
Anyway. My God.
Yes. Thrash an apple. P.S. That Mountain Dew flavor rules. It's actually so good. I did not think it was going to be any good. It ended up awesome.
Allie's just clicking things in the background.
Yeah, I was going to say.
She's just going on.
Marissa's learning how to produce shows, and Allie's like, let's just push buttons.
I like to disrupt a little. You guys are already going off topic. I was like, I'm gonna add a little spice, a little flair.
I love Thrash and Apple. It's so good.
But so I think realistically you can have your conversation about Justin Barron or Drew Hellison, but after that, everything should pretty much be on the table. Bowers, Kaut, even Ranta, I think should definitely be an option that the Avs are looking at moving if it's for the right price, of course.
Yeah, I mean, where are there some of those like mid? I'm curious where you guys feel about which are the mid-level or like the not like we're talking like Barrison and Olsen, like you really don't want to do it, right? Like you're really like, I would have to be bowled over by like we're staring down the barrel of like, we'd have to be pretty sure that we're going to lose this guy to a direct competitor in order to make this kind of move.
Yep.
I'm curious which of the guys beyond that. I think Drew Hellison's a great example, a guy that you really don't want to deal that would make you uncomfortable. Like it would be a cut that you're just like,
It's Hellison and Foodie that are right in that range for me.
Okay. I mean, I have Ranta in there because at this point he's so close that dealing Ranta would just be like, come on.
Yeah. See, I think for me, it's Justin Barron is in that first kind of tier where it's like you really don't want to do that pretty much no matter what.
Won't use the word untouchable, but it's not far from it.
Right. And then, in that next tier for me, it's Ranta, Hellison, and then Olausen are probably the ones where it's like, we'd like to hold on to these guys, but at the right price, if we feel like it makes us that much substantially better, you're fine with it. Then past that, I think you get into that point where you feel so differently about them because they're abs, not you, the proverbial you, because they're abs prospects and we've watched them, we've seen how far they've come and stuff. But if you're being realistic with where a lot of those guys will likely fall.
I mean, I think you get past that range and a lot of those guys just don't really have that much value either, right? Like you're not adding it. That's like a throw in on, you're already giving them a second. And it's like,
they're guys that you can sell, have enough upside that they could, I mean, AJ Greer is a semi-regular in New Jersey right now. I think he's like a taxi squad guy. So like guys like that, where it's like, yeah, you can plug them in if you want. The other place where
everybody has guys like that though.
The other area where I think you might be able to see some of these guys maybe have a little bit more value is if you are getting third teams involved. I mean, my mind goes to Seattle. You know, they need organizational depth in the same way that Vegas did for those first couple of years. And you know, if you're getting them to take on salary, maybe you drop them a mid-level prospect.
I think with a team like Seattle and those are the teams that you can see like, hey, we can give you Martin Kaut and he can play in your lineup tomorrow.
100%.
That kind of a move.
Yeah, Kaut and Bowers. I think that's where Kaut and Bowers have their strongest selling point is that, hey, we like these guys. We've just been a little bit too deep at times over the last couple of years to work them into the lineup consistently. But look at their AHL careers. They've been good AHL players. Shane Bowers has actually been really good this year. And he shouldn't be there, but whatever.
Where does Maltsev fall for you guys?
Yeah, I mean, I think Maltsev is a guy the Avs like, and they still want to see what's up. And with them still having, he's an RFA after this, because I think he's in the last year of his ELC, so he's still pretty young. So I think Maltsev is look, if Maltsev pushes you across the finish line for Claude Giroux,
right.
But right now we're seeing can Maltsev take Darren Helm's job? Because if the answer is a legitimate yes, then you're like, okay, well, this is a guy that we think helps us.
Yeah,
we don't want to have to take away a Comfer and Maltsev,
right?
You know, so that's I think that's where Maltsev is.
So he almost kind of falls into that Justin Barron tier where it's like,
if they ask about it, you're kind of like, what do you know? But it would be such an odd ask, I think, for another team. But you're also not going to be like, we're not having that conversation.
You're not going to scoff at it.
Come on. If you haven't seen the difference between Maltsev and Helm, I don't know what to tell you, fam. It's been better. It's not like light years better.
But how the Avs PK has stopped giving up goals.
Yeah, just by removing Helm. It's not even that Maltsev is on that unit.
Just Helm isn't anchoring it anymore.
Besides, Maltsev has become a world-class sit in the box because your team got called for too many men on the ice again guy.
Look, some teams are allowed to play with 6 skaters and some aren't, all right? That's just the rules.
Yep. And in overtime, sometimes 3 is too many.
Okay, well, we can get back to this conversation, but we are brought to you by DraftKings Sportsbook. They are still running their 56-1 odds deal for the NFL playoffs with the 2 conference championship games coming up. Pick the team to win on a new account with code DNVR. Bet $5, win $280 in free bets if you pick the right team. Are y'all crazy enough to pick the Bengals?
Dude, after this last weekend of games, I don't even know I don't even know anymore.
What's
Like,
I mean, I know no
No.
one's gonna like betting for the Chiefs in this chat. So
I mean, I'm not hugely surprised at where things ended up. I mean,
it's just how they got there was nonsense.
that's
Right,
the thing.
right.
That was like, because I was like, there's no way I'm picking a California team in Green Bay, right? And then Green Bay played like the one game that they physically couldn't to throw that.
Yep.
So it was just like,
well, and my whole thing, I think we were all at the bar last week when I was talking to one of our Broncos guys, and I was like, how can you pick against Tom Brady at this point? And then the Buccaneers get way down, and it's like, well, he finally didn't have it in him.
And then Tom Brady things happen.
Right.
it's so
And
funny
it
that Tom
looks like
Brady
he's
gets
gonna
credit
pull it
for
off.
wild shit happening when
Yeah.
he's not even on the field, but it's just like Tom Brady magic, baby.
Well, it's just like it's happened with him on the roster like so many different
many
times, and it's like
times,
I'm not even kidding. It's Tom Brady magic. It's
Right.
fucking crazy.
like they turn that ball over and then they snap one over without with Drew Stafford or not even paying attention. Matt Stafford. Matt Stafford.
Drew
not even paying
Stafford,
attention.
Drew Stafford's been out of the league a long time.
Yeah. Matt Stafford and Peyton Manning flashbacks and all this stuff from Super Bowl, whatever that was, 48. And it's like, so Tom Brady didn't even get to take his helmet all the way off, and something crazy happened, and he gets to go back onto the
Right.
field. It's
Like
just
that
what
wildly benefits him. Yeah. It was
Yeah.
so funny, man.
and then you think like, oh, there it is. He's he pulled it off again, and then LA wins in a walk-off kick, and it's like, holy
They
shit!
decided not to cover Cooper Kupp for some reason.
You're talking like a guy who came this close to breaking every major receiving record in 1 year, and they were like,
Let's
"Don't
put him
cover
one-on-one in man coverage. It'll be fine.
Yeah. Like,
Well,
no big deal. They don't have the balls to do that, right?
And the Buffalo game, is like heartbreaking as that was for the Bills, but it's like they gouged you on 2 plays in 10 seconds
All you
to
had
get
to do
upfield and get to
was
overtime.
not shit your pants on a bubble screen, and you win this
Right.
game. Like,
It was just
You know what sucks is that, like, obviously as like a lifelong Broncos fan, like I can't stand the Chiefs.
Yep.
But I love Patrick Mahomes.
oh, dude, he's so
I
fun
think
to watch.
everybody in his orbit sucks. But
Right.
Patrick Mahomes rules, and watching him like the game ends and his team is celebrating and he sprints down the field and finds Josh Allen to like
Yeah.
hug it out. I was like, can I just hate you properly?
Yeah.
Just stop being so likable, you dick.
all right.
Well, and like he's likable and he's just good as hell.
Yeah.
Like the stuff he does is
Yeah, like I mean, it's just like, dude, the guy's a special talent. So
look, if you want to go bet on the Chiefs at DraftKings, we won't tell anybody. Go get your $280 in free bets when you use code DNVR to sign up for a new account. Must be 21 or older, Colorado only. Other terms, restrictions, and conditions apply. See DraftKings.com/sportsbook for details. Of course, if you have a gambling problem, call 1-800-522-4700. And then go head on over to the Ball Corporation when you need a little bit more money to put into DraftKings or otherwise. They are hiring right now for their product technician role. They pay $27.39 starting, with opportunities for raises every 6 months. You can text Golden to 77222 or go to jobs.ball.com and search for Golden to get your application today. Ball is dope. They give great benefits like PTO, insurance. They will help you take classes if you have holes in your resume to get those things filled out. So they got you pretty much covered. Check out the Ball Corporation today. Again, jobs.ball.com to see what's available at their Golden plant. Third period of the DNVR Avalanche podcast presented by DraftKings Sportsbook. You guys want to finish up this conversation about prospects, or are you ready to dive into the stupid?
I think we're pretty good on. I think we all kind of sit in the same room when it comes to
More
the
or less.
prospects. Like,
Yep.
I will tell you, I did not think I was going to be this defensive about the idea of moving Oscar Olausen a year in, where I'm like, I don't want to do it. I don't want to do it. Like a year when they made the pick, I was like, ooh, that'll be good trade bait.
Olausen's just so weird because he was never, from all his Euro footage, it was never like, oh my God, that shot. It was like, that shot's good, but it's not insane. And his entire time in North America has just been like, oh, he can beat literally any goaltender at any time with that shot. Okay, Great.
Right.
We
Even NHL goaltenders we saw in preseason, like he played a couple legitimate NHL goaltenders and smoked them.
His one WJC goal was against Askarov. So
Right.
we do have a couple super chats we can get to really quickly here. $5 from Pin King. The rule is to ban AJ for a bad suggestion.
Okay, well, I get to be on my show forever then because I only have fire takes.
And 2 more from Pin King. Fleury will never come to the Avs. Correct. That is a correct take. We don't have to ban you now, Pin King. Good job.
Yeah.
Well, I didn't know. I did know. I had seen you here adding those little banners throughout your live shows, but someone was like, "No banner. Does this mean the Avs are trading for him?" And I was like, "No, it's just Allie. I forgot. I'm sorry. Avs are not trading for Fleury."
Yeah. Don't worry. We'll get the banner back.
You're safe on that one. Banner just had the day off, I guess. Okay. So,
the Nuggets guys are making a real push for this newcomer of the year bullshit.
Yeah,
and let me just say,
don't let that happen for Aaron Gordon. All right,
Aaron Gordon is dope, but he might be their 4th best player when they're fully healthy. I guess I'm probably their 4th best player. Devon Taves is a top 5 NHL defenseman, and the only reason that he isn't running away with all of this is because Cale Makar happens to exist. So you guys make sure that you do the prudent thing and you go out and you dominate the Nuggets in this vote. Because if Devon Taves loses this, I'm holding all of you responsible, and there will be some sort of a punishment.
When Taves wins this at the bar, can we like put up a big projector of AJ's face just going like
I don't love this idea, but you make sure Devon Taves wins.
We can do that just overlaid on the
I'm good with that. That was
like,
the night of Landy.
Like compilation that Dimitri, however you pronounce his last name, did of Devon Taves last week.
Just knocking pucks out of midair. Yeah.
Dope plays all over the place. And we'll just overlay that with the AJ thing.
I'm good with all of this, but as long as Devon Taves wins, that's all I care about.
True. Devon Taves got to win that one. Let's move on.
Hold on, Edwin. Don't you dare start this happy birthday for Melissa. No.
It's too late now. It's too late.
Oh my God.
Everyone wish Marissa happy birthday.
No.
Just get it out of the way.
I'm turning 18, guys.
Oh my God.
All right. So for Marissa's birthday, are we all going to give our one target that you'd like to see the Avs go after?
Yeah.
And AJ's just going to say Luke Shen and be done with it.
Yeah.
Haven't I done this? All right. Go ahead.
No, does anybody else want to start?
I'll go if you're not ready.
I mean,
yeah, go ahead.
Jesse and I are just whichever one of us goes first. It's going to say Claude Giroux.
Yeah, so
I wanted to give someone else the opportunity to say it because I've got a couple others.
I'm picking a flyer, but it's not Claude Giroux, and it's really boring. I don't know. You could maybe put this on like the same level as Luke Shen, but
wait. Hold on. I want to see if I can figure it out.
Okay.
Because now I'm super curious.
We're waiting.
Oh God, is it Justin Braun?
Yep.
You son of a bitch.
Look, he's the perfect Jack Johnson replacement, dude. Nothing happens when that guy is on the ice. Literally nothing goes on when Justin Braun steps into the ice. There's no offense. There's no defense. The puck just gets put into stasis and nothing happens. And he's actually, like, when you look at the underlyings, he's a significant positive impact to the Flyers' horrendous defense. So
I don't feel like there's such a thing this year. I'm just no longer a believer in significant and positive when it comes to anything Flyers related.
So
fair take.
They're cursed.
The
Philly's haunted.
The chat in there is where I thought maybe you were going, because it was a name that I thought was interesting just because his salary is so much lower than I thought it was. Keith Yandel, I thought, was an interesting name on that Flyers back end at $900K, just because. Why don't you like that?
Because he's bad now.
I mean, again, if you're looking for a bottom pairing guy, I thought that was I thought that was a really interesting name at the price tag that you could slot in ahead of Jack Johnson. Well, I'm just going to nod my head if you're just going to shake yours.
Justin Braun, you could sell me on Justin Braun like next to Jack Johnson is like your third.
All these people are saying no, and they don't even know why they're saying that.
But Keith Yandel is washed. It's done. The only reason that he's still hanging about.
My point is, you're talking about a third pairing guy. I'm not saying I want Keith. This isn't me like, but I thought that was a name that was interesting because that's the exact type of person that the Avs have added around the deadline recently.
Yandle's a lefty, right?
Yep. He's also bad. Once he breaks the Iron Man streak, he can finally get scratched and everybody can move on. He's like he's had a pretty impressive career and he's been a really good offensive play driver for a long time. It's done, man.
Not saying it isn't, but it's just a name that I think is interesting.
That dude will end up at Edmonton or something, and it'll just be like, holy smokes.
On a multi-year deal.
All right. This comment.
This is the type of locker room guy that we needed.
Look at this. He hasn't missed a game in 14 years. Look at that heart and dedication. Leadership.
Comment, obviously, the Avs should never actually trade for Brendan Lemieux, but I have an extremely deranged reason as to why they should.
Oh, here it goes. This is going to involve a trade tree, isn't it?
So, no, not quite. The Avs have had a player play for them for every single pick 1 through 30. They've never had a player play a single game for them that was picked 31st overall. We know they've had multiple at 32nd. Connor Timmins. Brendan Lemieux was picked 31st overall. So if he plays a game for the Avs, the list of picks that have played for the Avs goes up by at least 2. I would have
that
to
is
check
maybe the most Rudo hat pull I've ever.
I remember when he told me about this, and I was like, "Shut up!" And then I went through and I looked, and I was like, "No, he's right."
There were some like real stretches to get there, but it happened. So
There is.
Anyway, Keith Yandel, Justin Braun, and then the one everyone wants in Claude Giroux. Is that where we're going, AJ?
I'll let Jesse take Giroux. No, I'll take Giroux.
Yeah,
You've got others, and I'm curious what they are. And if it's Joe Pavelski, then we would have just flip-flopped 1 and 2 anyway. But no, Claude, look, if you can, I say this with the gigantic caveat that if you can make the money work and you're comfortable with the deep cut of price tag, then I love the idea of a Claude Giroux because I've been there and done that kind of guy who's seen a little bit of everything except the Stanley Cup in his life. And he's been around. He does tons of stuff, right? Like do you put him your top power play unit? Do you put him on your second power play unit? Either way, you feel pretty good about it, right? Like it's weird that, you take Nichushkin off of your power play unit, for Claude Giroux, and you're just like,
that seems good.
Yeah, that seems like that's got potential. Because then your second power play unit has Newhook, Burakovsky, and Giroux on it.
Right.
Or he takes like Kadri or Landeskog's spot, and then one of those guys is on your like. It's just it's for that. It's a great fit. He's still got an unbelievable shot. And then you throw in that he's right-handed, which the Avs have coveted. You throw in that he can play kind of all over their lineup and kind of mix and match wherever they want him to go. But he also serves as kind of a buoy for the Burakovsky baddies. Like when Burakovsky's not any good and he's going through that stretch, kind of like what we're seeing now.
I mean, I think he can almost keep players like Burakovsky from having those stretches because, yes, he can shoot the puck, but you look at his career and it's like, this guy's had multiple 60-assist seasons.
I mean, he's a complete offensive player, but you also look at his defensive impact in his career. He's always been a good defensive player. He's no longer a center, but he still wins a shitload of faceoffs. So next to Kadri, that's probably a little redundant. But when you start talking about end of game scenarios,
It's not Kadri and nobody else.
right? But also because he's right-handed, it gives you the ability to have one of those guys. Because right now, your top right-handed faceoff guy is JT Compher.
And that's bad.
And Claude Giroux is winning 60% of his draws this year. And you see that the Avs will put, if it's on the right side, it's a righty. If it's on the left side, it's a lefty. Not just the Avs. Pretty much everybody does this. So if you have a face-off at the end of a game that you absolutely have to win, 51.8% for JT Compher this year. All right, a career year in the dot for him. So he's doing that. He's doing well in that area. Great. But Claude Giroux at 60 in the 60% range.
Right.
That's a dominant face-off guy. And then you throw him in there with Nazem Kadri as well, and you have two guys that you can win face-offs with in an end-of-game scenario. And it doesn't matter which side of the ice. Because if you end up on the left, then it's Kadri. If you end up on the right, then you go with Giroux. You don't need him to play down the middle anymore. And he can play through your lineup in different areas. So it's and the production hasn't fallen off. Like, he's 34, but he's still doing his thing.
Yep.
And that's where, the Joe Pavelski is going to become part of this too, for a lot of the same reasons. Almost all of the same reasons.
Right.
The difference is that Giroux at the end of the year, at 34 years old, can use Joe Pavelski's contract as the ultimate comparable here. And you look at, hey, would you give Claude Giroux a 3-year deal to be kind of like that Joe Pavelski? Like, talking about keeping that guy, not just him being a rental, but finding a way to keep him, knowing that you're probably losing Kadri. You keep a Claude Giroux, and
then Claude Giroux becomes a flex player for you, where you're probably moving Newhook up to 2C, but if it's not super smooth transition, Giroux can play C for you if you need him to.
Well, and you can almost even kind of do what that top line we'll see do every now and then with Landy and McKinnon, where it's like, yeah, if Newhook's struggling to adjust, I mean, you could even make those changes multiple times throughout a game.
Yep.
Where Giroux is playing center in these
sure,
situations.
yeah.
Right. Yeah. Which, again, we've seen Bednar do with that top line.
Yeah, Billy says faceoffs are overrated, and they kind of are, in the sense of when you look at a team and you say they're a 47% team or whatever, it's not that big of a deal. There's not a correlation between winning faceoffs and winning hockey games, but situationally, they're crucial.
Yeah. They're huge.
And having a guy like that, having a guy or two like that, because what would you rather do? Go out and get Luke Glendening, where that's literally all he does? Or would you rather have Claude Giroux, where he's going to help you in a lot of different ways? Yeah, he's not going to be a center. He hasn't played center in really quite a while. He still takes a ton of faceoffs because he's insanely good at them, but he has not been a center for a while now. So move him around. It's fine.
He's kind of like a super, the richest rich person's version of JT Compher.
But and he's even redheaded, for fuck's sake.
Yeah, I was gonna say. I mean, AJ, you bring up a good point. We've talked about this a bunch of times on the show and stuff about situational faceoffs. How many times have we been in press box, at the bar, whatever, watching a game and saying, "Win this draw, and you win the game. Win this draw, and you kill the penalty." Over the course of an entire game, there's 100 faceoffs. Okay, sure. Maybe 80 of them are just kind of whatever, but there are going to be some that are that are important, that lead directly to things either happening or not happening. And just having another guy because now between your two top lines, you have 4 different guys that you feel pretty damn comfortable with taking a draw. That's power plays, that's late in games, that's when you're looking to generate something. I really do. Obviously, we're talking about Giroux here. I'm going to give another name, but Giroux is, like you said, with the asterisk of making it work from a money standpoint. I don't know if you can find a much better fit for what the Avs are looking for in terms of what's going to be available at this deadline.
Yep. And the interesting part, I think, about the Giroux conversation is nothing is going to really change over the next 2 months, which it's why we're so cautious about this conversation today, because we have no idea. But Giroux makes their top 6 better today, and he'll make it at least this much better 2 months from now. Right.
Yeah, he'll that's a player that I think will be interesting to see if the Avs really do want to make a move. For Giroux, I think you'll need to get another team involved, and I think a couple of those teams we listed earlier, Seattle, Arizona, would happily hold on to a mill and a half in exchange for a pick or a prospect or something. So it'd be tough. There'd be a lot of legwork to make that one work. But I don't think for a second that Joe Sakic isn't going to look at every single angle on a deal like that, if it's possible to get done.
I mean, so let me like, it's obviously really easy to be like, Claude Giroux. Yes.
Right.
What is a bridge too far in terms of a price
for him?
Mm-hmm. You're gonna have to give up a first.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, so
you're
for
you're
sure.
20.
Yeah.
You're 20.
I think
girl bye.
I think it's a first, a prospect, and a roster player.
So they're gonna say, "Give me a first, Barron, and Comfer." Like,
well, they'll probably ask for Newhook first.
Well,
but
then we'll say no to that. Obviously.
Yeah, you'll send them pictures of goat dicks.
Yeah. I mean, if you're talking like a first, and then those prospects in that next tier that we were talking about earlier. So I'm just gonna. That made me lose my focus. So I'm just gonna, for the sake of what we're talking about right now, a first.
So if it's a first, Justin Barron and JT Compher, are you good?
I'm good. It would hurt, but I'm good.
Yeah.
What if they said Drew Hellison and Sampo Ranta instead of their top prospect? Give me 2 guys off of your next level.
I'd do it.
Probably still good. Yeah.
Okay.
Because you and now the other part to this is the conversation that we've had around Darcy Kemper, right? If you do that and you go win a cup, you're like, Sampo who? Oh, that's right. That prospect that was with the Avs.
Could have been Champo, but instead got traded.
Right.
Back to simple life.
Yeah, no, I think if you're to me, like, that's the price point where I think everybody's happy. Philly's getting a good return. The Avs aren't really having to give up, really anything that you're not immediately upgrading on your roster. And those 2 prospects, you say, we feel like we've got prospects that are in that same tier. So we're fine moving on from those because we think this makes us better right now. And like I said, maybe in that situation, you've got to throw in a mid-round pick to a third team to eat some salary. Beyond them giving up like multiple firsts and.
Yeah. So like, that's where I'd go next. Like, if you're saying just Barron is fine or Hellison and Ranta is fine, would you go Olausen and Hellison?
And a first
and
JT
Compher. Yes, and the money from Compher and a first. Yeah,
and I'm not sending anything to another team for salary purposes.
I mean,
right? I probably would.
We didn't really get into the specific details of working out the salary, but
yeah,
yes.
I would probably still do that.
Okay,
he's a first line player still,
right?
And you're not even asking him to be that. He's just capable of it.
Yeah. I think he makes your NHL team so much better immediately that they're really going back to that conversation we had last segment. There just aren't many guys that you say, oh, I just don't think that's worth it. Because he makes your team that much
Sort of
better.
like Newhook, yeah.
Right.
Would you guys give the same price for Joe Pavelski, knowing that those
No.
guys are going in division?
No. And that's a big part of it.
I think I'd get close, but probably not quite as much for Pavelski.
Right. I wouldn't give as much. But yeah, so Joe Pavelski is definitely on my list. But the other name that we've talked about and someone was just talking about here, we mentioned a couple defensemen earlier. John Klingberg is the name for me that I think is going to be real interesting come trade deadline time, given depending on what Dallas is doing.
For me, that is entirely about Bowen Byram. If Bowen Byram is back and he's healthy, I'm not messing with John Klingberg. Right. If he's not, I'm messing with John Klingberg.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And that's part of what I think is going to be so interesting come trade deadline time. We talk so much about this defense being such an X factor for the Avs in terms of matchups and their ability to move pucks up ice.
Yeah.
And just adding a guy like that, knowing that he wants out of Dallas, his salary is a lot more palatable. And again, Dallas wouldn't have an issue moving him to Colorado because they know that he's probably not sticking around here past this season. So you're not sending him in division. And I think you'd get a very motivated pending UFA out of him. And it just like you said, it gives you that dynamic back that you've got with Byram right now of just being, so multifaceted on your back end.
And as a righty, he kind of
right
just gives you like that natural, like you put him into that top four, and then you just have the Johnsons.
Right. But that's a name that I do. I think it's going to be interesting to keep an eye on. But that is one that he's on my list right now. But to your point,
he's going to go to Carolina.
With Byram is, like we've been saying this whole show, Byram is something that will change this significantly between now and the deadline.
That's one of the conversations where it's really hard to get into at this point, right? Like we don't know what's going to happen over the next 2 months.
So again, the comments that are like, this is where I get really annoyed with this type of conversation around trade deadline time. If you're making moves and you win a championship, nobody cares who you sent and where.
Yep.
If it results in a championship, it doesn't matter. So if you think that moving pieces for a rental from an in-division opponent gets you over the hump, if you truly believe that, and it does, you don't care if you have to play against those guys for the next 3-4 seasons because you got the cup out of it that you needed. Now, obviously, if you do all that and you don't win, well, giving stuff away for pieces that don't work out, that's going to hurt regardless. But with where the Avs are at now, there's a lot of fans who have become fans of the Avs over the last 10, 15 years. So it's always been about, which is amazing, which is great. I love seeing this fan base grow. And for so much of that time, it's been about holding on to your assets and accumulating picks and letting your prospects develop and see what you can get and don't give away assets. They are not there anymore. We are pushing our chips to the middle, trying to win. Again, I like to use a parallel for another team that's in town. The Broncos, yeah, it sucks that they've sucked for the last few years, but they suck because they gave up so much trying to win a championship that it's taken them a long time to get back to a competitive state. That really, it's not great if you're a Bronco fan, but you have that championship just a few years ago. So you can live with a little bit of pain. And that's where I think the Avs are is, hey, if we've got to mortgage a future, 7-8 years down the road to win a cup now, they're going to do it. So it's going to be interesting. And at the end of the day, if they end up going on to win it all, no one's going to care what the price was to get there.
The fear ultimately is they don't get there and spend the money, and then it's the worst of both worlds. But if you have those answers, then you should be an NHL GM. So
right.
You just can't be afraid of the moment.
For
Every
sure.
single year where you're just like, oh, the future, the future, the future. But
Yep.
you also do have to care about the future, and you have to realize
Yeah.
the Avs have traded a lot of second round picks. They've now traded a first. They've traded a prospect that they used a really high pick and 4 years of development on. You do care about your farm system because it does, when your roster gets expensive, as the Avs roster has, you do have to get contributions out of guys on ELCs and $1 million deals. You have to.
And
it is a necessity.
You're in an interesting situation for the Avs right now, because if you trade Justin Barron, you say, well, they still have Helleson. Well, they still have Barons. On the forward side, if they trade Ranta, well, you still have Olausen, you still have Foodie, you still have a couple of other interesting guys down the line. If they do that this year, and then you go to next year, and they're talking about trading Helleson, that's when you start talking about those cupboards are really starting to look empty at that point. But are they there yet? It feels like there's still some stock in the cupboards.
Yeah, they've got enough in terms of prospects. Again, they don't have a first or a second this year. I would be willing to bet that third ends up going at some point for something. But yes, Drew, I completely agree. They've got enough there right now that with where this organization is at. And the other thing to keep in mind, you make a great point, AJ, about like you need to keep those players around as your roster starts getting more expensive. But the team is still relatively young. A lot of those guys are locked up long term. Of course, you've got McKinnon coming up. You need to figure out something in net. But you don't have to worry about Makar. You don't have to worry about Mikko. You don't have to worry about Gabe. So you do have a little bit of an idea of what your money situation is. And I think you're right, Rudo. You've got just enough left in the cupboards in terms of prospects and picks that I think they can do real well for themselves. But to AJ's point, you have to focus on the moment, but you have to be realistic, and you need to say, we're comfortable moving on from this many future pieces, but we're not going to go beyond that. And that's where I think Joe Sakic has really earned a lot of respect and runway from this market in showing that he knows his limits and he knows when he's not going to go beyond it. And so if he sees something that he truly think makes the team better without sacrificing too much, it's going to be something he's going to explore.
Okay. I think that's probably a good place to leave it for today. So we're going to get out of here. Thank you, everyone, for hanging out in the chat. We appreciate all of you. We're back Wednesday with the full deal. We got pregame, we got the watch along, we got postgame. So be sure to come hang out with us at that. Like and subscribe on the YouTube channel. If you want to hit the bell to get notified when we go live all the time, you can do that too. We appreciate all of you, and we will talk to you again tomorrow.